Hi Year 4 and welcome to your Tuesday afternoon science lesson. We're going to be continuing our theme in science, talking about food and thinking about what different animals eat. So yesterday we talked about classifying animals or categorizing them by what they eat. And we talked about these three different types of classifications that scientists use when they're talking about animals. We talked about carnivores, which means animals that only eat other animals or fish. We talked about herbivores and the clues in that title in herb, which is a green thing that grows, isn't it? So a herbivore only eats plants and plant foods. That could be berries, it could be vegetables, it could be fruits, seeds, it can be the stalks and leaves of a plant, or it can even be the bark of a plant, of a tree. So anything that comes from the plant is a plant-based product. Or an omnivore, and an omnivore is an animal that eats a bit of everything. So it has a mixed diet. So can you pause the video? I've got three pictures of three animals here. I've got a rabbit, I've got a badger, and I've got a wolf. See if you can match up the labels of herbivore, carnivore, and omnivore with those three animals. Okay, so hopefully you got these ones right. There was actually quite a big clue, which I only realised afterwards in the question, that the picture of the rabbit in this one, so a rabbit is a herbivore. I've got a wolf, which is a carnivore, just eats meat, and I've got a badger, which is an omnivore. So hopefully you got those ones right. And thinking a bit more carefully, what do you think we are? What are humans? Are we carnivores? Are we herbivores? Or are we omnivores? Now, if you remember back to when we were talking about teeth, there's quite a big clue in our teeth about what kind of animal we are. And because we have incisors and canines and premolars and molars, that gives a clue that we are actually omnivores, because we eat a little bit of everything. We eat some plant-based things. We eat fruit and vegetables and things like bread and pasta and rice and grains, which come from plants. But we also eat meat, and we also eat fish, and we also eat eggs, which come from animals. So we are also carnivore. We also eat those things. So we are omnivore. So today we're going to talk about some more new words, that special words that scientists use to describe the relationship between living things. So here I've got a lion, an antelope, and some grass. And scientists say that they would say that the lion is a predator. And if you look carefully at the picture that's here, you can see that what predator means is that an animal that eats another animal. So we can clarify that here. A predator is an animal that hunts, kills, and eats other animals. So the lion is a predator. You might have heard that word before. I'm not quite sure where, maybe on some game or something. And then we've got the antelope, and the antelope is what's eaten by the other animals. So it's an animal that's eaten by another animal. It's called the prey. So it's eaten by, it is the food of another animal. It's eaten by something else. And then we've got the grass, which is a producer. And again, the little picture gives us a clue that the producer is a plant that's eaten by another animal, or maybe even two other animals. So a plant gets its energy from the sunlight through photosynthesis. You might remember that from year 3 when you learned about that. And all plants get their energy from the sun, and that's what helps them to grow. If you put a plant somewhere where there isn't light, then it won't be able to grow. So today we're going to be talking about food chains, and a food chain shows how living things are linked together by their food. When we talked about food at the beginning of this term, we said that food is there so that we can get energy so we can live. So all living things need energy, and they need a source of energy. And energy passes along this food chain. So at the start of the food chain, we've got a tree, and the tree is eaten by the giraffe. So the tree gets its energy from the sun, and the tree is then eaten by the giraffe, and the giraffe gets its energy from the tree. And then we've got the cheetah eats the giraffe. So the giraffe is eaten by the cheetah, and the cheetah gets its energy from eating that meat, from eating the giraffe meat. And then the cheetah is eaten by the lion. So the lion gets its energy from eating the cheetahs, from eating that meat. So all of that energy comes originally from the sun, but passes along that food chain. And you can see it's like a chain, it's linked together by those arrows. So that's why we call it a food chain. So let's watch a little video about food chains.
Every living thing needs food. Plants make their own food in their leaves. Then, plants get eaten by animals. And these animals then become food for other animals, making a food chain. All food chains start from the sun. Plants need light to make their food. Animals that eat plants are called herbivores, but animals that eat other animals are called carnivores.
It's a very mixed farm. We've got lots of different enterprises. We've got dairy cows, beef, sheep, pigs, arable crops like wheat and barley and oats, and also vegetables. This is wheat. This was planted in the autumn and will ripen in about August time. We'll harvest it then. All living things are part of food chains. The wheat takes the energy from the sun, turns it into this lovely green growth, and eventually it comes to seed and provides the wheat that we use to make bread and also to feed animals with. There are many animals and insects living in a crop like this, and you start with things like aphids, which come in and feed on the wheat. They're eaten later in the season by things like ladybirds and bigger insects. Those insects are eaten by little birds, and sometimes those little birds might be eaten by big birds, birds of prey like kestrels and buzzards. And so you have a whole series of food chains in any crop.
So in those food chains we saw in the video, we could see that the energy was passing along the food chain. First, it came from the sun into the plants, and then the plants were often eaten by smaller animals, which were then eaten by bigger animals and larger animals until you got to the top of the food chain. And we can label the parts of the food chain with these words that we learned earlier today. So we can say that the tree is a producer because it makes the energy from the sun. And we can say that, I'm just going to move this up here so we can see a bit easier. Then we can say that the giraffe is the prey of the cheetah. So it's eaten by the cheetah. The cheetah is the prey of the lion. So it's eaten by the lion, but it's also a predator because it also eats the giraffe. So it's both a predator and a prey. It's both. And we can say that the lion is a predator because it only eats the cheetah and it's not eaten by anything else. Okay, so we've got the tree, which is a producer. We've got the giraffe, which is a herbivore, so it only eats the plants, and it's the prey of the cheetah. The cheetah is a predator of the giraffe. And we've got the cheetah is the prey of the lion, and the lion is the predator of the cheetah. So we can classify different animals by what they eat, but also by the part that they play in the food chain. So let's organise this food chain. We've got an eagle, we've got a snail, we've got some lettuce, and we've got a hedgehog. So I know that the first thing in the food chain is going to be the plant thing, isn't it? Because that's what gets the energy from the sun. So I'm going to put that over this side of the screen. Now, looking at these things, I would guess, because I have lots of these in my garden, that the snail eats the lettuce because that's a smallish animal. And I don't think it's going to be that the snail eats the hedgehog. That would be a bit weird because it's a lot smaller. So the next smallest animal is the snail. And you do quite often see snails in gardens eating plants, don't you? And then an eagle is much bigger than the hedgehog. So I think the hedgehog lives in the garden and eats the snails. And then the eagle eats hedgehogs. So if I was going to draw my food chain with the arrows, I would say that the lettuce is eaten by the snail is eaten by the hedgehog, and the hedgehog is eaten by the eagle. and I could add on the labels to show the energy passing along the food chain. So I've got, first of all, at the top of my food chain this time, I've got the predator. The eagle is a predator because it eats the hedgehog. The hedgehog is a predator of the snail, so it's a predator, but it's also the prey of the eagle. So it's both of those things, it's predator and prey. The snail is prey of the hedgehog, and the lettuce is the producer because it gets its energy from the sun. So we can label the parts of the food chain and see what's eaten by what. One thing I forgot to say actually is there is a difference between this kind of prey, which is P-R-E-Y, and the kind of praying that you might do in a religious building or at home, like something to do with religion, which is when you're praying to God or to Allah or to a different god or a goddess. So pray in a religion has got an A, but we're talking about pray with an E. Okay, different meaning. Okay, so we can organise food chains into different webs. So usually living things are part of more than one food chain. If you think about something like, well, like us, for example, people eat lots and lots of different foods. We don't just eat meat from cows, for example. So we have lots and lots of different foods that we eat. So we're part of lots and lots of different food chains. And this is called a food web. Put a little picture there which shows, which we're going to look at in a bit more detail. So I saw at half term, I saw a fox in my garden. I don't know if anyone else has seen any of those recently, but I've seen a lot of them around. So I wondered, what is the fox eating? What's the food web for a fox? And I did a little bit of research and I found out that foxes eat lots of things. They eat mice. So they might be hunting mice. They eat pigeons and they eat rabbits. But they also eat things like berries. So they also eat berries if they can find those. And they also eat seeds and grains and things as well. But that's just one part of this food web, because if you think about, well, what does the pigeon eat then? The pigeon eats some berries. It also eats, it also eats some grains and things. And it also eats snails. And then I was thinking, well, what does the mouse eat? And mice eat worms. They eat snails. And they eat berries. And to be honest, they probably would eat grains as well, but I'm not going to draw that because it's just going to make it very messy. And then rabbits we know are herbivores, so they eat plant materials. They will eat things like the seeds and they will eat things like the berries. So you can see that what we've got here is quite a complicated web of different food chains. We've got one food chain here which we could follow, which is the worm, which is eaten by the mouse, which is eaten by the fox. But it's not as simple as that, because the mouse also eats other things. So we could say the berries are eaten by the mouse, is eaten by the fox. So food webs show all those different relationships of different different food chains within that. Okay. And we could label the different parts of the food web here as well, couldn't we? And different parts of the food web will show different paths. But for example, the fox is always going to be a predator. The mouse is a predator and a prey because it's eating these other animals, and it's eaten by the fox. And the blackberries and the seeds are producers. Okay, so your task today is going to be to order a food chain. I have put together in the assignment some pictures of different animals, and we are going to order them into a food chain. So your first task is to look at the things just like we did before and try and work out what's going to be at the first thing in the food chain and what's going to eat each part of that. So I know if I look for a plant, that's always going to be the producer. So if I put that here, the grass is going to be the producer. Then looking at these animals, I would say that the grasshopper is probably the next smallest, and it lives in the grass, so it probably eats the grass. So the grasshopper eats the grass. Then I've got a toad, which probably eats the grasshopper. That's the next biggest thing. And then I've got a snake. So we sometimes get adders and things that eat toads. And then I've got a hawk, which is actually quite a big bird, and it's also a bird of prey. It's a predator. Okay, so my assignment is to first of all order these things, and if you can't move the pictures because it's on a Word document, you could just maybe put numbers next to them. So I could say number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5. So I could just do it like that. And then what you need to do is you need to, in the boxes, you need to type the name of each of these things to show the food chain. So we have got the producer in this food chain is grass. The prey is going to be a grasshopper. So remember, your prey is usually going to be a herbivore. The other parts of the food chain, they could be omnivores or they could be carnivores, couldn't they? Because they could eat lots of things, including plant things, or they could just eat meat. So the grasshopper is eaten by the toad. So the toad is a prey of the snake, but it's also a predator of the grasshopper. And the snake eats the toad, so it's a predator of the toad, but it's also eaten by the hawk. So the snake goes here. And then finally, the hawk is a predator. It's at the top of that food chain. Okay, so that's your task for today. You've got, I think, 4 food chains to do in the assignment. So maybe number them in your head or put them into order. And then you need to type the name of each animal into the box. That's it. Have a nice afternoon and I will see you soon. Bye.